edition of the Hoosier Hurry Up. I'm Michael Rayo. I'm here with Mike Petrie. Mike Petrie, welcome to another edition of the Hoosier Hurry Up. How you feeling today?
Doing really well, Michael.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. I'm back from Louisville, Kentucky, and from Bloomington. I was able to hit up the last two games. Back home in Connecticut as it is now. So it was exciting to see a couple of games in Bloomington for once. But it's definitely good to be back here.
Sure.
So we're back talking about the IU North Texas game here. Indiana won that one 49-24, and honestly, this game was never really in question. Indiana scored early with touchdown on their first drive, a shock onside kick right off the bat, which honestly was a brilliant coaching decision. And it was just all downhill from there. I mean, Mike, your initial thoughts on this game?
You know, it was good to see them put the proverbial foot down. I think that it was a game they had to win, obviously, and so coming into a situation like that can be tricky for the team that's favored. You've got some fan support that's a little wishy-washy, like I'm not 100% sure. Is this going to be the same old, same old? And as a team that's growing up, they're having to fight that too. They're having to say, are we different? Is this going to be another team that loses, 2-3 games to teams that we shouldn't lose to? So more than anything, the fact that they came out, they stopped North Texas, they score again, and just get the ball rolling. I thought that was really good for IU, just to get the confidence up, if nothing else.
For sure. I mean, it was an excellent confidence boost, if nothing else. I mean, it definitely was a big boon for the passing game. Nate Sudfeld finally was able to get on the same page as Shane Wynn this week. Sudfeld, 230 yards with 3 touchdowns. Wynn was able to get off the schneid with 127 yards and 2 touchdowns. Tevin Coleman also had a huge game. But, I mean, the passing game, I talked about it a little bit last week. I mean, we were a little bit concerned about it last week, but definitely you have to be encouraged by what you saw this past week, even if it wasn't against all that great a competition.
Right. As much as anything, what I really liked was not only the fact that he was able to get lined up with Wynn, and quite honestly, he's been finding Shane Wynn for 5-6 catches most games. I think Wynn had an off game against Maryland, but for the most part, they've had no issue with each other. But I really liked how he was able to spread the ball out, in particular getting the tight ends involved, because I think that's going to be a really big point of emphasis. If you've got an offense that you can spread teams out, and you've got 3 or 4 wide receivers out, somebody's getting single coverage, whether it's Wynn, whether it's one of the inside receivers. And then if you can further force the defense to commit more and more people to the running game, that's going to let those inside receivers really have a field day if you can be on the same page as them. So the fourth and 4, 4th and 3, where they went for it at about the 30-yard line, and Sudfeld had a nice little rollout and a pass to the tight end. I thought that was great. That's a great sign, because if you can run that play, that's a play that works, by the goal line, that works in the red zone. We saw them using it so often with Bolzer last year, and I think that because the wide receivers, as we talked about last week, are so small, that if you're looking for a big target, it's going to have to be one of the running backs or one of the tight ends.
Right, and Indiana has a few tight ends actually that do pretty well. I think Fuchs had his first touchdown of his career this past weekend, and he's a guy that a lot of people are pretty excited about. Very athletic, big guy. I mean, even if he doesn't factor in as much this year, he's going to be a guy to watch going forward. So I totally agree that the positives out of the tight ends were something to be very encouraged by this week. Indiana really does need to get the short passing game going here over the next couple weeks. But I think the fact that Coleman had another big game. I mean that's not really something that should surprise anyone at this point. I mean, 17
another 150 yards,
Right, another 150 yards on 17 carries, no less. So, I mean, he's only taking 17 hits, but he's still racking up his yardage. I mean, that guy, the guy has been the best running back in the Big Ten this year, and I mean, it's really not even that close. I mean, so it definitely a lot to be encouraged by. Indiana did much better than their average on third down this week. Yeah. That has been an area in which Indiana struggled over the course of the season, in particular in passing situations. But the Hoosiers did pretty well. It's obviously connected to much more success in the passing game. Overall they had about 600 yards of total offense and 8.3 yards of rush. So, I mean, it was a dominating effort today.
Right.
Or excuse me, this past Saturday, not today. Right. But it was really a great effort from the offense. It wasn't necessarily unexpected because I believe I mentioned this on the podcast. I mean, this North Texas team honestly just isn't that good.
Right. I mean, you were much more willing to call out the fact that this was a game that IU should win and should win handily. I've just grown to accept the fact that I will never trust IU to win a game handily, to be honest. Going away, statistics, whatever it is, I've seen way too many, 35-31 wins over Nicholls State to even ever feel comfortable with the fact that this is a team that IU should beat and should beat pretty handily.
Oh, I hear you there. It's just that this North Texas team, I mean, they honestly haven't played anybody, and they're still ranked 124th in FEI plus. I mean, which considering there's 128 teams, 124th is not exactly anything to be proud of.
Right.
I mean, I guess if you want to take some positives out of the statistics, they're actually pretty average defensively, really about as average as you can be. So, I mean, Indiana should feel pretty good about putting up 49 points. Sure. They're pretty rough offensively, though, and I mean, I think that the Indiana defense has shown enough to feel still okay after giving up 24 points. The thing that you might worry about, though, is the fact that they weren't able to convert a couple of those into field goals. I mean, if you're looking at a 14-point performance instead of a 24, you're going to feel a lot better about it. But I mean, overall, it's hard to nitpick too much with this team after a 49-24 win. I mean, we just don't see enough of them.
Right. I think the big key to it, too, is that a couple of those scores came essentially in garbage time. There was one drive in particular where, it was well passed over, and all of it, you could just see it was just about 7 plays right in a row where North Texas was just able to get whatever they wanted offensively, and that's a concern on one hand, but on the other hand, it was 49-17 or 42-17 at that point. So, not going to get too overly worried about it. What I really liked from IU, and I think the positive trend offensively that they've really is going to determine how much success they've had. When they're not turning the ball over. Sudfeld did not get picked off, I don't believe, and I don't believe they had any turnovers. If I'm not mistaken,
the one turnover that they had was actually a fumble on a kickoff by Damon Graham that led to a North Texas touchdown. So I mean, that's not necessarily a possession that you would expect a defense to stop North Texas on, considering they got the ball in the 35. So, I mean, that's another reason why you can't take too much out of giving up 24 points. Sure. But you're right. The offense did an excellent job.
Not turning the ball over, I think, is going to be just a huge key, because you're talking about this offense. They've shown at least enough explosiveness that if they have the ball in their hands for long enough, now that means you've got to convert a couple of third downs to keep drives going. That means you've got to, essentially take advantage when you're given the opportunities. But if they can do that and not turn the ball over, they're going to make a big play somewhere. And conversely, if you can keep the defense from having to defend a 20-yard field, a 30-yard field, they've shown that they can be driven on, but they really have done a better job this season of avoiding giving up those huge chunk plays. So long as you can force a team to make enough, a concerted effort, a concerted drive, and put that together, that's such a huge lift for this defense.
I totally agree that Indiana's done a much better job this season of forcing teams to nickel and dime them down the field. Mm-hmm. We'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about the Iowa game, because I've got some stats that honestly concern me quite a bit about this Iowa game.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right that Indiana's done a much better job of holding teams from those explosive drives over the course of games, for sure.
Almost to the point where you're kind of wishing they'd just give up a big play and be done with it. Because
Fair
you can
enough.
kind of feel it coming, you know?
Right. So I mean, overall, it was a dominating performance from Indiana. Like we said, not too much you can nitpick. Really is a game that Indiana should have won and should have won by quite a bit. But it's one that you're right. In the past, Indiana hasn't won all of those games. So I mean, it was good to see them put the boot down and really make this one pretty uninteresting early on.
Sure.
But with it becoming uninteresting early on, that kind of leads into the next topic. A lot of schools that you're looking at, you'll see, fans staying there through the fourth quarter, even when the games get kind of uninteresting.
Sure.
Not the case this past weekend in the Indiana game. I was tweeting throughout the game, and it was just absolutely abysmal, some of the fan support that we saw in second, third, fourth quarter. I mean, the student section, I can tell you that there were maybe about 1,000 students by the end of the third quarter. I mean,
Right.
Not even. So it just, do we have a fan support problem, in particular, talking about, that student side?
It's something that I think one, there are a couple of trends that are working against IU. One, it's much harder to build that fan support, and it's much harder to get to where you've got a consistent sold out stadium than it is to have that consistent sold out stadium and essentially create a scarcity issue without getting too much into the economics of it. That once there's that scarcity there, people will stay even if your team's not all that good. But it's
Sure.
really hard to get there. As long as there's plenty of seats available, it's really hard to get to sell, up to that sellout level, and to build a consistent fan base, even if you were winning. And IU has not. So it's hard
Mike,
to too much. And then on the other hand, you're in a situation where even winning programs are having trouble selling tickets, and that's just because the fan experience at home is pretty nice. You can mute the Big Ten network.
That's a different that's a different issue entirely,
Yeah.
and it's not really something that we're going to be able to solve at Indiana. But I mean, ultimately, when you're talking about the support at games right now, I totally get that this team laid a massive egg against Maryland.
Yep.
I mean, there's really nothing else that you can say about it. It was a game that Indiana really should have competed in, and they really weren't in that one after the first quarter. I mean, so it was obviously a huge disappointment, and I understand that to a degree. Fans want to see results before showing up. I'm not necessarily expecting sellouts, but the
Right.
fact that you've already paid for a ticket, I mean, the paid ticket numbers were somewhere in the 40,000,
Right.
mid
And
40,000.
nowhere near that many people showed up. Sure.
Not even. And the people who did show up, I mean, there was a decent student crowd early on. I mean, trust me, I've seen a lot worse.
Sure.
But, once you got through the end of the second quarter, I mean, it's as if people forgot that there were 4 quarters in the
Right.
game. I mean, it's just, you've got at the end of the game, you've got the Indiana football team having to run over to the student section and sing the fight song to a grand total of about 30 fans.
Right.
I mean, it's really, honestly, they need to do away with that tradition. I mean, I understand the thought process behind it, but it's flat out an embarrassment. I was cringing watching that from the other side of the field. So.
That's part of the fan culture of the fact that, again, it's not hard to get tickets, so the value of staying for the whole game is diminished a little bit to the students. The fact that they can't, it's 2 hours out of the week or 4 hours out of the week they can't drink beer. God forbid. It's that's just the way the culture's been at IU, and winning cures all ills, and it's not winning 1 week, it's not winning one season. It will take a good 5-10 years of pretty constant victories, because to give you an example, if you were to say look at Northwestern, which Northwestern has been a pretty consistently winning team. It's not hard to get tickets to the IU Northwestern game. And they are still consistently almost any Big Ten opponent, they are going to have a larger visiting section than the Northwestern student section. So
though, Mike, you're right on that. That it does take time to build a sellout culture. We're not necessarily going to have the crowd like Wisconsin does overnight. No. We're not necessarily going to have that kind of crowd, just based on 1 or 2 wins. But the thing is that the fact the argument that we're waiting for a winning football team doesn't hold a ton of water to me. I mean, actually, you go on you look at the Kevin Wilson show tonight, and actually this happened a few minutes ago. Don Fisher tonight on air actually called out the fan base, saying that our fan base, and this is a direct quote, said our fan base needs to wake up and realize how much better of a football team this is now.
Oh, sure.
I mean, honestly, teams are going to have ups and downs, especially one that is rebuilding from ground zero, as Kevin Wilson did when he took over. I mean, he pretty much blew the program up, is what he did. And it takes a little bit of time and a little bit of a little bit of slack to really build a football team. I mean, honestly, Indiana shouldn't have played the way that they did against Maryland. But the fact that so many people bailed on this team after one performance was tremendously disappointing.
I wouldn't even put all that much. I wouldn't read too much into 1 week to the next. The fan energy, it very well may have been different at Maryland and at North Texas. There are a lot of variables involved in that. Maryland, it is a Big Ten opponent. It's a little bit more of a name, so more people are going to buy tickets going into the game. They may have thought that they were also getting a Big Ten ACC ticket for the basketball challenge. I don't know, but if you're going to have a bigger, more excited crowd for that to start with, then you add on to the fact that it was 75 and gorgeous, and plenty of people. Everybody who would have otherwise planned to come down from Indianapolis and Fishers and Carmel and to come up from Louisville, they were like, okay, yeah, we're still making that trip. When it was 50-ish, 45-ish, and raining Saturday morning, I'm fairly certain a lot of people said, let's look at the radar. No, we'll hold off on that. And you can feel it. And obviously students are, for the most part, on campus, so that's not as big of a deal. But it's still, do I want to sit out here for 4 hours, or do I even want to? I've got my ticket. Do I want to sit out here for 2 hours and watch the first half as long as it's interesting? Once that happens, I'm going to go somewhere else and get warm, either through liquid libations or through a heater or both. So,
I hear you, and I honestly am going to start to chalk it up to the fact that Indiana is a soccer school now. So people think that we play on a 45-minute, 2-half schedule in which we should get out and
you get 2 hours. That's it.
But that Indiana soccer team looks pretty darn good right now. But that's a topic for a different podcast, certainly. So overall, you certainly hope that Indiana can really string a couple wins together here so that we can get a big crowd for homecoming. And
sure.
In order to get to that point, Indiana has a big matchup here against Iowa. Iowa is honestly not a team this year that is really scaring too many people.
Right.
I mean, you look at it, this Iowa offense is pretty weak. I mean, they put up 31 points against Northern Iowa, but only won that game by 8 points. 17 in a 3-point win over Ball State, I think they lost at home to Indiana State. So, I mean, they're not anything
They followed that up with a very strong performance, yes.
Right.
Against Ball State, or against Indiana State, I should say.
Right, and you look at it, they lost by 3 to Iowa State, but then rebounded and won on the road against Pitt and beat Purdue just after that. So, I mean, but this Iowa offense hasn't put up more than 24 points against an FBS opponent so far. I mean, honestly, they're not that good of an offense.
No, and that's I guess the good news for IU. I think it's a weaker version of a much weaker version on both sides of the ball of the Michigan State team that we saw last year. In that, I remember going into that game, and if you remember, like 3 plays in, Tevin Coleman goes 75 yards, scores a touchdown, and then Michigan State fought back, got it to either 14-7 or 21-7, and then IU gets another big play for a touchdown. And I think that when you're playing a team that is fairly strong defensively and specializes in keeping the score low and fairly weak offensively, that's going to play to IU's strength on both sides. Because even if the game is played in the teens, even if the game is played 20-14 or whatever it is, IU can play in that, and they can make 2 or 3 plays offensively and make it hold up because the other team's offense just isn't able to keep up. Unfortunately, as we saw last year, Michigan State turned out to be a lot better than we had anticipated, and was easily able to put up that 42 points offensively.
Right.
So that's what you have to watch out for, is that if the defense can hold a weak offense to 20 points, I think IU's in really good shape. If the weak defense gives up 31 points or 38 points to a really otherwise pedestrian offense, then we've probably got more problems than we'd be able to detail here anyway.
So I hear you there, and it's ultimately something where Indiana's defense is going to have to be just a little bit better than the offense, because it's not as if this Iowa offense is anything to write home about, but. So here's where I'm about to throw a curveball.
Sure.
I actually feel worse about this game than I have any game on IU's schedule so far.
Fair enough.
It's not because Iowa is a particularly great team in any capacity. It's just that Iowa is very good at the things that we aren't, and their weaknesses are things that we are awful at.
Right.
So you look at it, this Iowa team, and they're actually a lot more efficient passing than rushing the ball, despite what you might believe and might have heard about this team. Weissman is only averaging about 3.3 yards a carry right now, which is pretty poor. I mean, so they're actually a lot more efficient passing the ball than rushing it. But you look at it, and Indiana's biggest weakness defensively right now is methodical drives. They're actually 126th in the country right now in methodical drives. So there are only 2 teams worse than that statistic than we are right now. That's actually Iowa's strength as an offense. Iowa grinds out drives better than any other team in the Big Ten. They're 3rd in the country at methodical drives. They really are able to grind out drives on you as an offense, and that's an area that Indiana really, really struggles with. Iowa's going to be totally content to just push the ball down in 3 yards in a pile of dust, whatever you want to call it. And honestly, it's got a real chance to grind out 16, 17 play drives and just grind out the clock here. I mean, it's just not a good matchup for Indiana defense in terms of what they do well, and it really has me worried.
Right. Now the one thing I'll push back on.
Ultimately, you look at it, though, and that's just one side of the ball. You're also sure.
You're cutting out on me,
Mike. I might have a little bit of lag on me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you got a little. You're cutting out.
Okay. Let's see. Can you hear me now, Mike?
Yeah, that's better.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Nope.
All right. So sorry about that, folks. But in terms of that's only one side of the ball, though, is the thing. So you look at the Indiana offense against the Iowa defense, and this Iowa defense is very clearly the strength of this Iowa team. The thing that gets about an IU fan, they've always done well in terms of those explosive drives. Indiana is 4th in the country in terms of drives that each play averages 10 yards or more. So I mean, they're able to move the ball in chunks. Big issue, Iowa is really great at defending those, And it's ultimately it's going to be a unstoppable force, immovable object argument here. So whoever wins that explosive drives metric, when you're talking about the Indiana offense versus the Iowa defense, is going to be a big leg up in this football game. Actually, when you look at it, and this is a pretty significant stat. Oh. Goodness, we're really having some technical issues here, Mike. I'm sorry for the trouble.
No, I'm all better now, actually, unless you can hear some. Apparently, I hit the wrong button on my headphones. What I was going to push back on a couple of things, and mainly out of ignorance here. The methodical drives from Iowa's offense. That strikes me as something that you are playing with fire as an offense whenever you are in the top half, whatever, of methodical drives. And I'm curious how sustainable that is from one week to the next, if that's something you can truly build an offense around. Because in order to do that, you really have to be almost, religious about getting 3-4 yards per play. And if you do that, obviously there's a very small margin for error. So the first question I'd ask about that is that, is that something that we see just a ton of randomness, year to year? And if it is, it would tell me that, we're going to hopefully see this is the one time, that offense is a little less able to do that. Or if it is something that they're able to build around, you're just able to throw them off just a little bit. In terms of the IU offense versus Iowa defense, the question I'd ask is, do you think IU is capable of having those methodical drives? They obviously don't rank very high on them, but that's also part of a function of the fact that they've just gone, had the explosive plays. And when you have those explosive plays, obviously you don't have methodical drives.
And that's a really
question I'd push back to you.
No, that's a fantastic point. I mean, ultimately you're looking for a bit more balance there because, Indiana, if they can score in 7 plays, there's no reason to run a 16-play drive. So I totally hear you there, and Indiana's the fact that Indiana is so good at moving the ball in terms of those explosive drives, does offset the fact that they are pretty poor at moving the ball down the field piecemeal. So but what worries me is the fact that you're essentially going against Iowa's strength, which is not letting a team beat them over the top. Iowa actually is pretty weak at defending those methodical drives. So it is something where Indiana may have to get outside their comfort zone and really more slowly than they're used to in order to score on Iowa. This Iowa defense isn't exactly unbeatable. They have done a solid job of defending some pretty awful teams, to be frank. But it's not unbeatable. I just worry about the fact that they are pretty solid defending against the run, which is our bread and butter, and actually they're really good on passing downs, which is something that we really struggle with. So ultimately, it's just when you look at the matchups, I just don't like the matchups. It's not that Iowa's unbeatable or even that they're that great of a team. Missouri is a significantly better team than Iowa is. It's just that Missouri's strengths, I think, were areas that we could mitigate a little bit. Sure. Whereas with Iowa, I worry that our weaknesses kind of really don't mesh well with their strengths. So it's more of a matchup issue than me thinking that this team's unbeatable.
Oh, sure. And I think that's going to be it's obviously it's a key is that are you going to be able to stop Iowa from getting those methodical drives, which again the margin for error on that is not that great. And on the flip side, you've got to put yourself in position where it's not 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 15. It's 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3. To keep your options open. And I think with that, you're going to see a lot of the short passing game, a lot of the things that we saw IU do to get Sudfeld kind of on a roll last week, I think they're going to continue that. And if they can be successful with that, that's going to be huge because, Iowa has so far been good at, as you said, keeping terrible defenses down or terrible offenses down. But are they not giving up big plays to Purdue because they are fantastic? They are good at suppressing the big plays, or are they not giving up big plays to Purdue because Purdue's terrible?
Right, and these statistics are the raw statistics that I'm talking about when you're saying this offense is so explosive. This offense isn't particularly good at defending methodical drives. Those statistics aren't necessarily weighted for schedule strength at this point. However, the overall metrics are,
sure.
and the overall metrics say that Iowa is 36th in the country right now defensively, which, again, Missouri is better. I mean, Missouri is objectively a better team than Iowa is. I just worry about the matchup to a degree. I mean, it's Iowa's. I'm not sure if I quoted this, but they haven't given up a single explosive drive all season. So I mean, it's just something. It's something that you worry about. I mean, so they are due for it. I mean, but ultimately, if you are going to take a chance at beating a team 4 or 5 yards at a time, I'd rather do it with the number 1 running back in the country right now, which is Tevin Coleman. So I mean, it's a game that Indiana absolutely can win. The matchups and the numbers really do worry me. So.
Sure. And the fact that they're playing at Iowa and they haven't particularly played well at Iowa, although that's always somewhat deceiving too. They haven't played well at anywhere for the they've been a pretty awful team. So how they fared in one stadium over the other is somewhat irrelevant to the discussion. And I think that right, wrong, or indifferent, Kevin Wilson's done a pretty good job of at least changing the conversation as much as he can around his team of forget what happened in the past. This is this year's team, and we're going to go out and play, and we're going to win or we're going to lose. We're going to do it because, we're good enough today, not because Iowa beat, Indiana 61-0 or something back in 1997. Not that I'm bitter.
Yeah, that's rough. But ultimately, Indiana has struggled on the road. I mean, but it's like you said, it's not the same Indiana team. Hopefully, though, they can leverage a little bit of that success that James Hardy happened to have against Iowa. I mean, Hardy just. I don't know if he had an ex-girlfriend from Iowa, what the heck happened, but he really liked to play against the Hawkeyes. So, I mean, ultimately, Indiana, they're going to have to put up a decent amount of points, but if you look at it, if they put up, 35 points in this game, this should be a game that they have a real chance in. So, they also should get a boost because I'm going to be on a plane during this game, so the fact that I'm not watching it tends to usually help Indiana.
Good.
But I mean, it's obviously a big game. If Indiana wins this weekend, you're potentially looking at Indiana against Michigan State being on ABC, which is another huge opportunity for this football team. So I mean, looking at it, just a ballpark. What's your score prediction for this game against Iowa on the road here?
I think it's. I would not. I probably have sounded a bit like a homer. I've been talking IU up. I think that this is probably a game IU's going to come close and fall a little short. I'd say ballpark 28-24 Iowa right now would be my guess. So if IU can keep it to 2 or 3 touchdowns from Iowa, I think they win. If they keep it to 4 and above, even IU's offense won't be able to score that many against Iowa's defense.
I'm actually thinking in the same ballpark. I'm actually thinking 24-21 Iowa. I do think that this game is going to be pretty close. I just, like I said, I think that it's going to be difficult for Indiana to keep Iowa from holding the ball for the majority of the game. Indiana should be pretty encouraged by the fact that they do that. Iowa isn't particularly good at at scoring the football, unfortunately. I mean, ultimately, this Iowa offense is not really good enough to beat Indiana on its own, so it's going to require Indiana tripping over their feet a little bit, but I mean, after seeing the way that Indiana performed against Maryland, I'm not really necessarily ready to predict Indiana putting up, 35, 40 points on the road against another Big Ten. So but ultimately, if you look at it, I am currently 2-3 right now in score predictions. So I mean, it may give Indiana a much better chance in this game.
Right.
But
just pick against them and be happy to be wrong. So.
Hey, I was wrong for the Missouri game, and I was really excited to be wrong
Absolutely.
about that. So.
I think we all were.
Well, hey, Mike, thank you so much for your time. It was really great talking to you despite the technical issues. My apologies if it's my internet connection. I've lost power twice today.
Oh,
so,
goodness.
Thanks so much for your time, and thanks, folks, for listening to us. Certainly keep an eye out for more coverage in anticipation of this Iowa game on Saturday. You should see another written preview here later this week with some additional score predictions. Also, keep an eye out for Crimson Cast Live with Galen and Scott on Sunday, and we'll be back with you again Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. So thanks again, Mike. Certainly appreciate your time.
Thanks. Talk to you soon.
All right, take care.
All righty. Bye.